Um, I think the main things that I want to focus on today is where my mindset was when I even got involved with drug addiction, the progression of drug addiction, the recovery part of it all, and where I'm at now. So I'll try to condense like a whole lifetime into this amount of time that I have. So growing up, my family dynamic wasn't the greatest, which I know a lot of people have that same story. I experienced a lot of things at a very young age, a lot of different types of abuse for many years. And I always tell people, I think, us humans are really good at becoming accustomed to whatever it is that we're dealt with. The abusive situations that I was put in, maybe the first time was hard for me to comprehend, but over years of it happening, it just kind of became my normal. I witnessed a lot of things that maybe people go through their lifetime not experiencing. And that's just part of my story. And I still think that I managed to kind of play normal throughout my childhood. I was involved in sports. My family was extremely involved in church. I had a good support group and network in that area. It was just my home life. When I was with my mom, and then when she had remarried, the man had adopted me at age 2 or 3. And then when they had divorced at 9, since he had adopted me and they had 2 other children together, my younger brother and sister, we would go over there for visitations on the weekends. And I think that's when the abuse really started to intensify, when he kind of had his own space. And we encountered a lot, and I was the oldest, so at 9, my sister's probably around 6 at that time, or 5, my brother's 2. I mean, those are young ages to experience what we experienced. And so at that point, around 12 is when I started to act out in behaviors, because before then I was a really good kid. I didn't like getting in trouble. I liked being good at things that I did. I took sports seriously, school academics, I was into all of that stuff. And then at age 12 is when, I don't know, something switched inside of me. I started to act out in odd behaviors, self-inflicting, eating disorders at a very young age. And I think that's when my mom started to notice something was going on. It got to a point where there was a situation where my mom had found out, and her and I had a long conversation in a car. I don't remember what parking lot we were in, but I remember she confronted me about it, and we both, basically just cried our eyes out, and she let me know that we were going forward with court. And the court situation itself was traumatic enough. I mean, it was 2 years of basically just reliving our entire childhood in front of the man, who caused all the pain that he caused. And at that time, no one knew what our family was dealing with besides our family, so I still was going to school trying to be as normal as possible, whatever that means, and also deal with the whole court system. After that, he had a really good lawyer, and he did have some diagnoses that were used to his advantage in court, and he managed to get about a year, if that, and a rehabilitation for, sexual predators or whatever it's called. So he didn't even go to prison or anything like that. And I do think that affected me. That was a situation that, because I managed to get through the court process with the hope that I was going to put him away for a while. And not because of my anger towards him, because I don't know if at that time I really had anger towards him. I think I almost felt more guilt, in some way it was my fault, but I knew who he was as a person. I knew what he was capable of, and I wanted to keep that from happening to anyone else. So when I realized that that didn't happen, that's when the anger started to set in, and just a lot of negative emotions. And at that point so I went to a girls' home for about a year at age 12, 13, and that was helpful. I got reconnected, with my relationship with God, and I did pretty well with it. I went back to public school. Kids are mean, and happened to find out the situation. And once that got brought back to me, it just kind of, again, restarted all these negative emotions, all these negative behaviors. Around 14, 15, I met a guy, and then at 16, I became pregnant with this guy. And at that time, I want to say around 15 is when I started to smoke weed and everything and drink a little bit. But once I found out I was pregnant, I stopped everything and I made the decision that, I was gonna have this baby and we were gonna like be this family, even though I'm young, I'm 16, still a child, but in my brain, I accepted the situation for what it was. And I gave birth. And I want to say, I don't know, the first 6 months, I did really well with it considering, I was going to school, staying up at night taking care of a baby. I had to drop out of softball and volleyball, which was difficult for me because that's been like the one thing in my life that I held on to. My relationship with her father became abusive. It got to a point where it was so bad that I finally left. Abuse in that relationship to me felt comforting. And I know that that's hard to understand, but that's what I knew. The love I got from my stepfather and the things I dealt with were also tied in with abuse. So it almost felt at home. But then it got to a point where I knew it was time to leave, where I genuinely felt fear for my life. So I did. I left. And shortly after that, I had met another guy. And he was the complete opposite. He was as sweet as could be, but he had a drug problem. So at 16, what is a drug problem to me? At this time, I started getting back into the party scene. I was smoking and drinking and gotten into taking pills here and there. I wouldn't say that I was physically addicted. Mentally, I obsessed. But so when I found out that he had this drug problem, I don't think that I comprehended I didn't comprehend what I was getting myself into. And I didn't care because he was nice to me. He treated me good. He didn't, put his hands on me. And so I justified it. And he is one of the first people I was with when I was introduced to heroin. When I found out what he was doing, my initial thought was fear. Like, what are you doing? Like, everyone tells us, heroin's bad, but then at the same time, throughout my childhood, like I said, bad things is what I was accustomed to. I wasn't raised and I'm not giving excuses, but I'm giving reasons as to where my mentality was when I was introduced to drugs. When I was introduced to drugs with my mentality, bad things I was almost attracted to it in a way, and I didn't comprehend everything that came with that one time of agreeing to do it. And so I did, and I remember the first night I did it like yesterday, and I remember instantly, I knew that I had gotten myself into a situation because I loved it way too much. It completely overpowered any other care in the world that I had, sports, my child, my family. Instantly, I did not care. If it didn't involve getting high, then I didn't care about it. And it was quick. It was that quick for me. And so then the progression started. So I caught myself, I used to, I was in high school with these kids who did the typical high school partying to people who were snorting heroin. But the one thing I always said I would never do is use a needle. That's what everyone said. That's the one thing you'll never do. And at some point I ended up in a room with people who were shooting heroin. If I was in a room with people shooting heroin 2 years prior, I probably would have ran the other direction. But at this point, that fear has slowly left because I'm slowly introducing myself to all these new things. And I somehow justified in my head, I'm just gonna do it one time. Like I'm just gonna try it one time, like everyone's having a good time, partying, like just one time, that's it. And it was the same situation. I do it one time, and again, I knew that I was never doing a drug any other way besides needle. It was instant love. And that's what it was. So I went through very quickly. My addiction spiraled out of control. It got to a point where I was homeless, not allowed to live anywhere. I had burned all my bridges. I had a vehicle that I slept in. There was a night where I attempted suicide. I figured if I get really high and pass out going off the mountain, then I won't feel, because I wasn't scared of dying, I was scared of the pain of dying. So I convinced myself to do this, but I got too high on the way up the mountain and wrecked going up the mountain, and I totaled my car, and I managed to live. And that was another bottom moment for me. I can't even kill myself, and that's the mentality I got to. That was my only way out at this point, was to die. I wanted to die. I think a lot of people don't grasp that. I think a lot of people, even with like the debate over Narcan and stuff, and they think it's enabling, like, I didn't want you to give me Narcan. Do not bring me back to the life that I'm living. That's where I was at. I was to the point where I was ready to die. I was in and out of mental institutions, detoxes, rehabs, jail, and my mom, it got to a point basically where my mom called the TV show Intervention. They came out and filmed me for about a week. I was going down to Baltimore once or twice a day, and just the things that I did in my addiction. I had overdosed twice, and after that, Intervention came out and offered me treatment in Arizona. And I went out there for 5 months. It was the first like long-term treatment that I had been to, and I learned a lot, but I wasn't willing to work on my trauma. I knew I had warrants out in Maryland, so I used that as my excuse to, leave after about 5 months and turn myself in. And I convinced myself I was going to turn myself in, but when I came home, it was instantly the addiction. Instantly. As soon as I stepped foot back in West Virginia, all the logical thinking I gained in those 5 months were out the window. And it was back to, I'm not doing this, I'm getting high. And I did. I went on the run, and I got high for a while. I was so miserable that I ended up turning myself in, and it was quick. I used for about 3 to 4 weeks, and I was ready to be done. I was tired, so I turned myself in. I went to prison. I continued to get high in prison. I was supposed to get out after like 5 months on parole, but with me getting high, I got in trouble. And I went to solitary confinement for 42 days. I got out about an hour a week for a shower, if that, because most of the time they didn't even let us do that. And that was the moment when, for the first time, I asked myself, is heroin worth all of this? And for the first time, my answer was no. The consequences of getting high were not worth it to me anymore. And I looked around at the people I was around, the environment I was in, and for the first time I felt that I do deserve more than this. Like I don't deserve much, but I deserve more than this. And in order to avoid this, I have to stop getting high. So I did the rest of my time quietly. I stopped getting high in there. I just kind of stayed to myself. It was time to go home, and I was terrified. And that's what addiction is. I knew that it was only going to be me who put drugs into my body, but I was terrified of me. I was terrified. I had no rehabilitation. I had no tools as to how to stay clean. And they're trying to send me back home. I didn't want to come home because I didn't want to get high. I was tired of getting high, but I knew that something in me, I would have given myself 72 hours out here before I got high again after doing 14 months in prison. So, by the grace of God, someone reached out at the treatment center I went to, offered me to come back, and I did. And this time, I did whatever they told me to do. Even the stuff that I feel to this day was pointless. They obviously are doing something right. I'm obviously not. So I'm going to take the suggestion and just do what they tell me to do. And after a few months there, they offered me a job there. I had met my now husband out there, and we moved out here. I'm back involved with my eldest daughter. We started from the bottom up. We were sleeping on my grandmother's floor. He transferred his job out here. I got a job at East Ridge, and then slowly started working my way up. And we have 2 children together. We, own our own home now and our own vehicles. Stuff that back in my addiction, if they would ask what I want, I just want a job to have enough money to have a car. That's as far as my brain could get. I could not even comprehend normal people's lives. I couldn't comprehend someone having a full-time job with benefits and good credit. I didn't even know what any of that meant. I was so mentally at a standstill. And that's what the addiction does to people. When you're consistently putting drugs into your system, the brain chemistry, it slowly starts to change. The way I was thinking 7 years ago and the way I think now, it's night and day. It's 2 completely different people. But at that time, I was in denial about it. I look at people who are in drug addiction now, and obviously I feel for them, but even sometimes I struggle to comprehend, why are you doing this? Why are you not doing something about it? But in my addiction, I looked at normal people, and I couldn't comprehend what you guys did all day.